This breakaway session where we are going to focus on the topic of bridging the divide between the urban and rural development. Let me start by introducing the panelists who are going to present to us. Starting with the Deputy Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Her special focus is on cooperative governance. Mayor Tembing Kadimeng, pleasure to have you with us. We appreciate your presence here, and we hope to learn more from you about the district model and how it applies, and of course the opportunities there. And Deputy Minister Obed Bapela, if you could also get on the stage. You are not wired.
There's a mic there.
Okay. And Obed Bapela is the Deputy Minister responsible for cooperative governance and traditional affairs with focus on traditional affairs. And we also have Dr. Mike Sutcliffe, who will be sharing with us the city insights, given his extensive experience as the city manager of eThekwini, as well as advising other municipalities over the years. He will be presented to us as well. We will be joined by other speakers virtually. Let me take a look at the names that we have on the screen there. Professor Edgar Peterson, who will be joining us from the University of Cape Town. Connected, I suppose. And we also have Professor Phillip Harrison, who's with Wits University, also connected virtually. I'm not sure if Professor Danie Meyer is here with us. If we could invite you to join us here, Prof. Thank you. All right. Without further ado, let me tell you briefly how it's going to work. We're going to start first with presentations, and then after the presentations, depending on how far we go with them, we have a comfort break of about 5 minutes or so, and then come back and have an interactive session. Will that work okay for us? I think let's go through the opening remarks first, and then after that, pause for a while, and then go into the meat, into the detail of the presentations. So let me start with the Deputy Minister. Oh, I didn't tell you I'm Tim Modise, but I'm sure you you saw on the screen there. I'm your moderator this afternoon, and thanks for having me as part of the deliberations this afternoon. Let's start with you, Deputy Minister Tembing Kadimeng. Talk us through the perspectives of government in terms of bridging the urban rural divisions in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My mic, it's on. Oh, now I can feel I'm audible. Good afternoon to all of us. Good afternoon, DM. Good afternoon, my fellow panelist members. I think firstly, Tim, we need to look into the disparities and what causes them, and what caused the spatial injustice and the spatial divide. Firstly, between the rural and the urban areas. Possibly look at how far we have tried as government to move into the area with regard to corrections, what could be the difficulties that we have experienced, different ways on how best we could navigate the space so that we are able to bring people closer to areas where they are able to have a convenient and a sustainable life. I mean, if you look into the stats today, what the World Bank suggests, at least with regard to the studies that they did, which covers up to 2090, in comparison to 1960, where around 67% were residents sharing all over the space, including the urban divide then, but the spatial development of today suggests that people are moving closer to cities, or where at least economies are beginning to show light of viability, and there's something that is happening to an extent that there's been a shift from that 67% to around 45% migration from rural areas towards urban areas. Now, the estimations towards 2050s that we possibly, all of us, should be living in urbanized areas. So we need to look into areas of what we today call metropolitan areas as areas of what would people want across the spectrum of where they are staying. I was saying in one debate yesterday, gone is the language, very short or soon to come, where we'll be saying Johannesburg is only an urban area. If we're not careful, we're bringing a lot of people who are coming from areas that are far-flung to create some form of what you then in the township or in urban areas call informal settlements, which are a replication of what happens in rural areas. And with them not being planned properly, it makes it difficult for the cities to be able to accelerate their growth to cover everybody else. Deep slot is one example, and many other that you can think of in our metropolitan cities and our secondary cities. Greatest example of what brings this, besides the historical existence of spatial injustice, is these economic obstacles which comes with development or lack of development thereof. The patterns of migration themselves. It's so interesting that even in what we call in our government books, secondary cities or intermediate cities, Umsunduzi, for example, in KZN, how their growing patterns are. They are showing people moving more towards the center, no matter how small the center is. Prof will talk mostly on DDM. Oh, Deputy Minister Obed Bapela will talk. But we'll also look into urban synergies on how we will deal with this as a department. It is also important, I think, to contextualize briefly, Tim, what do we think as COCTA will be the role of the district development model in terms of trying to deal with all these problems, to create cities which are aligned in terms of ensuring that the line between the urban and the rural edge is minimized, if possibly eliminated. Because what we are trying to do actually is what we call go back to basics. Those who have been in government long enough, or at least in those days, will know that at the inception of mostly of the white papers, all of them were centered around one planning, coordinated implementation, interdependent and interrelated spheres of government, but operating within their own mandates. And that is what the district development model wants to do. We want to pilot it as a department in a development of a city, a coastal city in between Ogu and the Eastern Cape now. There's a beautiful stretch that is currently opened. But we must not forget that there have been 3 prior announcements into that, Lepalale being one of them. For example, what have we learned into those cities? Cities of today follows economies. I'm not sure if yesterday there was anything besides that, because Johannesburg is Johannesburg because of the gold. So the development has its own necessities, which make sure that cities are built, cities are created, and cities are then made to be sustainable. So without a plan that is coordinated from government, that is one, to ensure that government plans and implement at the same pace and same space, then we'll still be operating like we're not moving forward in terms of closing the spatial divide. So we have divided, according to how municipalities are structured, into 8 metros that you all know, and 44 districts. Some you may know, some you may not know. We've finished as the department the assessment and one plans of all these metros and the district. So in essence, if you take one district, it will either have a minimum of 3 or a maximum of 5 local municipalities. This will help us, one, in terms of institutionalizing capacity as well. Some municipalities are unable to attract skills and maintain those skills because of the rural nature of who they are. But if we are creating centers of excellence, it relatively will be manageable to look for 52 well-paid chartered accountants to be CFOs in these metros, including 44 districts, compared to looking for 257 chartered accountants. The same with technical directors, the same with HR specialists. So we're taking all our district municipalities, centering them into the economies of what their areas send. So the economic special drive will be there, the spatial development will be around the areas that the municipalities in those localities would want to drive. Then you plug a police station, then you plug a school, then you plug everything else into this one plan, and you'll be able to say government in financial year whatever will be plugging 1 billion in a particular space, in a form of Sandral, doing road A, in a form of Department of Education, repairing a particular school or building a new school. So we've actually had that consolidation in terms of both structural or the plan in terms of the strategy. It has moved into the plans of incorporating what departments are putting and plugging into those areas. And now it's on its third, almost final stage with regard to financials, National Treasury, plugging those finances and beginning to do a plan which moves and is aligned to the National Development Plan. I think let me stop there because I would want to focus more on the district development model and its plans on how best we could be able to plan together, implement together, and create a sustainable South Africa. Thank you,
Thank you, ma'am.
Moderator.
Deputy Minister Obed Bapela.
It's not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Team Modise, and thanks to my fellow panelists, those who are physically here and those who are virtual, and then the audience that is in the meeting here. Mine is just going to just add on the issue of the infrastructure challenges and then the opportunities that will definitely arise as a result of this plan that the President spoke to this morning, and then also the technicalities and then the elaboration made by Dr. Ramokgopa, who is the CEO of Infrastructure South Africa. At the level of the municipalities, we see a situation where majority of the municipalities, the infrastructure is old and aging. And then as a result of that, there's a lot of water leakages underground, hugely. That is happening because we have not been investing in that infrastructure. But secondly, also we see the population have also grown exponentially, so that you then have townships, establishments, but the infrastructure has always remained the same size. Adding people on top of that particular infrastructure is heavily loaded, and it's giving up. You know, spillages then of sewer on the streets, as you already see, in the cities, in the towns, and what have you. So the investment, although money has been flowing in through the Municipal Infrastructure Fund, which currently is at 15.8 billion rand per annum, with a projection that it will be at 17 billion, but we will take that money to almost 257 municipalities. So that model, therefore, as DM Nkadimeng was saying, we then to say, let's then use the district to leverage and make an impact on this money flowing. It's not enough. And I'm glad that yesterday, during the media press conference, they did indicate that there's a catalytic fund that is going to be established for municipalities in the infrastructure fund in the presidency. And it will then add up to this challenge of now modernizing and then improving the capacity of the infrastructure, get rid of the old pipes that are aging 80 years, 100 years, because when you look at the towns, yes, some are over 100 years, some are at 80 years. These towns are very, very old. The infrastructure was never expanded. And then that is why we have these challenges of the spillages and then the leakages that are happening. And the download that is there. So we'll therefore then wish therefore that this investment symposium or infrastructure will then be to look at the municipality space and really build and bring that particular infrastructure. But the skills also are going to be needed where divisions of the municipalities are going to be a key phenomena where we have to recruit the best engineers, the best planners to go back to the municipality space so that they could then begin to ensure that there's maintenance and then repair of this particular infrastructure, and we look after it. The only mayor at the time who really went on a very huge fundamental program of replacing the old pipes and then the systems was Mayor Masondo in Johannesburg at the point. And then Soweto is the biggest beneficiary, quite a number of townships are. He then said, every financial year, I'm spending X amount of money, of kilometers of infrastructure replacement. And it has worked for them. But you go to Msunduzi, it's leaking. I mean, anytime those houses can collapse because the leakages of the water underground is quite huge. So you then take all municipalities in South Africa, that is the classical challenges that you'll get. Therefore, the infrastructure fund will definitely help in addition to the revenue that is available, which is not enough. And the population that has grown from a mere 38 million in 1994 to a 60 million today, as we speak. So the population of South Africa has gone higher, and the infrastructure remains the same. And infrastructure means water access, sanitation issues, roads must be in better conditions. The gravel roads in the rural areas is a big challenge. The majority of the roads is just a third of the roads that have tars in the rural areas. But almost 70% of the rural roads is just gravel. And they are not well maintained because when it's rainy season, something happens. When it's too dry, something is happening. So we then have to look at the issue as the president announced, paving some of the roads, those that go to the homes, and then only tar the roads that are economic roads that will be carrying trucks, buses, and people to work and back, and then goods to wherever the markets are. So we then have to really make sure that the rural people benefit. The telecoms networks also, the online learning, the poor rural communities are not able to join, the city children, and the township children also are not highly connected like in the suburbs, and therefore we then have to look at the municipal telecoms infrastructure, including access to the Wi-Fi for all of them, and then also modernize the electricity access. Whilst 85% of the population now access electricity, but then the challenges of those that are still remaining behind, the quality, the load shedding elements are also there, and we are glad that the mixed electricity complex is now being unpacked, and we hope therefore that with the mixed renewal, mixed energy solutions that are coming up, we'll be able then to begin to see this infrastructure network benefiting both the rural and the urban equally, and so forth. But municipality space is where we say a lot of work ought to happen. The clover in Lichtenburg, in Ditsobotla, in the northwest, should not migrate from that municipality to go and establish a factory in Tegwin, on the basis that the municipality is not servicing them proper. The roads were bad, there was water leakages, water pools and dams along the road, and then the electricity supply was not giving them any security. So they've moved the clover to Durban, and there's another factory already from the same side that says if nothing happens, we'll go to a municipality where we can get better services. So we also have to look at that issues that where municipalities are, please invest in ensuring that the industry is serviced proper so that jobs remains there. And then if the jobs are there, there's a good revenue for the municipality. And then in that way, you are no longer reliant on fiscals and the indigent people increasing ask money. Because those who you have, all of them are unemployed. Thank you very much, Tim. It is probably one of the subject matter that will take questions from the floor at the point of discussion. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, Dr. Bapela, for your presentation there. Dr. Mike Sutcliffe.
Well, thanks very much. I did have a presentation, but it looks like they haven't got it to flight, so I'll just talk to it. I think that will be a little bit easier. I'm going to initially just talk about the context of the rural-urban divide in our country, because I don't think we have rural areas, and that might sound controversial, but I want to talk through what I would call the apartheid divide. And I want to start with just 3 anecdotes. The first was, I remember in 1985, there was the British company, Samcol, had fired workers in a place called Howick, and they were basically then had to meet in their township called Mpopomeni, and eventually people came and attacked them and killed them there, a number of people there. But anyway, I remember the first time I went to that particular meeting as part of the UDF delegation there. It's the other side of the Midmar Dam, and you go to this township here with a whole dam where white people every weekend would come and sail and use, and yet here, 200 meters from that dam, that community did not have water. Now, that's not the only community in our country, even today, because the dams were not built where people had to drink from. The whole infrastructure around those dams was built in the other direction. And it's not a question that we can say overnight the democratic government solves. So the first issue we've got to think about is who are the communities being affected. The second issue we've got to focus our attention on is something that still even happens today, where white business in collusion, primarily white business, in collusion builds infrastructure, often just replicating the apartheid infrastructure. Those of us who worked in the World Cup, and one day I'll write a chapter on that, complained in 2006 about the collusion of the big business. Instead of the CEO of the LOC congratulating us and taking the actions we suggested, he called us to a meeting with some ministers there, and we got bashed, or I got bashed, because I was raising things around that. The result was, 8 years later, the Competition Commission then eventually found those white companies guilty of collusion, and that still happens today. And the third issue is who makes the decisions about which roads get repaired, where they get repaired, etc. We've just been doing some work in Steve Chweti local municipality, decided to drive back to eThekwini on the national road, that's an N11, from Middelburg down to Newcastle. As you drive along that road, there's potholes, 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 generally where there might be some black people living, and suddenly you have a very smooth road, and then it's potholes, potholes, potholes. What is the smooth road? Well, it's a mine called Optimum, which is featured in the Zondo Commission. Now, the point there is to say that who makes those decisions is critical, because we must not keep replicating infrastructure that we don't as a country need. And so I want to take a very different view in looking at it, because when we look at where people live in our country, 80% of our people live on 2% of the land. But if you look at the reality is that white farms constitute about, the last time I looked, it was about 85% of the land in our country is white farming. And about 12% of the land, about 3% of the land is the former white urban areas. The farming areas contain about 5% of the population. The former white urban areas, let's call it that 3% is about 63% of our population. So as the DM indicated, people have migrated into those areas there. But the so-called traditional or former Bantustan or former homeland areas, they constitute about, the last time I looked, it was about 12% of the land, and that 12% contains 32% of our population. But they live in urban conditions. They live in high-density areas with houses that have often been unplanned. And what do we as government do? We often say to those communities, well, it's difficult to provide, which it is, to provide bulks in those communities that are often in the least economic places. You can't suddenly say, well, we're going to get rid of you all, just come into the urban area, in the urban areas, let's call it the economic centers there. So we have to deal with a very difficult challenge of transport and housing, how we basically integrate those. So for me, when I look at the challenge that we have, the first thing I say is that our most important infrastructure in our country is the people of our country. And who are those people? The people of our country that are the future entrepreneurs, they're the current entrepreneurs, are actually primarily black women. and this again might sound controversial, but if you look at black women, well, particularly women employment, you would actually find that black women in particular, about 60% are in the informal sector. About 25-30% are in private households. Now, those in the informal sector are all entrepreneurs. Most of them are employing other people. They're living in every part of our country, but they're living in circumstances that we've got to begin to deal with that. That's the infrastructure around them that we've got to build that future that we talk about. Because if we don't take all the green economies and you take the digital spaces, et cetera, down to a level at which the real entrepreneurial base of our country is, you're not going to reach all the communities that we would have. So the first step that I'm saying is just let's look at that informal sector. A comrade of mine, Comrade Zanelli and Becky, 20 years ago, I think it was, when I was in the demarcation board, did and has done wonderful work looking at the woman, rural woman in the financial sector. And a few days ago, we were talking about this, that no one is focused on dealing with that part of the infrastructure because they're the women who keep our economy going. They distribute, they're very good entrepreneurs. They don't go out of business because they can't afford to go out of business. They're not others who just say declare bankruptcy or whatever. And unless we begin to start saying that's the first part of what we have to build. The second thing, which might seem controversial that I would say, is that I've worked a fair amount with people who deal with land invasions. Now, I'm not saying that we as a government should approve land invasions, but people who arrange those land invasions are some of the best property developers I've ever met. People who even invade inner city buildings are often selling that space at higher rates than you would get in Sandton. When I was eThekwini city manager, I looked at the rates of those invaded buildings in the city, and people were paying rental rates higher than anything that you would pay in Mhlanga. They were entrepreneurs who were able to use an existing space for economic purpose, but they were outside the formal economy, outside of that. So the first thing that we've got to begin to deal with when we talk of this rural-urban interface is to focus on the base that will be the future entrepreneurs who will build those economies. They sometimes just need a few things to be able to deal with. The second issue is the land question there. Because again, when with some colleagues of mine, we've looked at the land across our country, there's at least 7 to 10 million hectares available of land right now, which is vacant, that basically we should either highly tax or government should take away and expropriate in terms of Section 25. We have a section of the Constitution that allows the expropriation. Because once you create a massive land bank in our country and then are able to begin to use that land bank for productive purposes, getting people access to that land and being able to use it, not in the way in which it occurs now, where if you come to Tshwane here, just down the road, you'll find white development has pushed Tshwane in the wrong direction. So now you have a whole eastern Tshwane of beautiful houses, but the people who are working on those properties all generally come from the north and the northwest, probably the northwest and west of the city there. So we've allowed a whole restructuring of our cities to reinforce a new income apartheid, which is still a racial apartheid, and not actually begun to deal with making our cities smart. And a smart city is about how we use technology to change what we're doing now. So the second broad area, I would say, we've got to deal with that land question to begin to make sure that we have viable economies. And anyone who owns land, who's not utilizing it, should not own that land anymore. I'm quite firm personally about those sorts of issues. The third issue is we've got to have far more brownfields development, and that's much more difficult. How do you deal with, I was in Bapela last week, and the challenge you have there is that all of these, and Jacini is just the same, where the bulks take water from a dam to the white areas, and then an informal settlement comes here, and they tap into that bulk, as it were, and of course, then that's in theory illegal. Well, it is illegal. But instead of reinforcing that and saying, well, there's a lot of water wastage when people tap into bulk systems like that, instead of us regularizing that and realizing that those communities are making an economic decision there, what we do is we say, no, we want to shut the taps fine everyone, etc. So we've got to begin to deal with what I call brownfields issues there, how we actually restructure at that level. The next issue is diversification, because unless we look at our economy in a very diverse way, we won't get anywhere. When I was in India a number of years ago, it was quite interesting that their planners now don't talk about land use anymore, they talk about building use. Because in your building, and I've got half a minute, in your building, you would have different land uses. And here we say, no, no, you're residential, you're mixed use, and then we've got industries over there. Except for noxious industries, everything can be done much more localized. And the last issue I would say around that would be much more multi-use and technology-driven things. We built our bulk water systems to make sure there are turbines in them so you can generate energy at the same time. And those are initiatives that begin to localize what often is called the green economy, but the green economy is often seen as these grand pictures elsewhere. I'm sorry, I always...
No problem. Thanks very much, Dr. Mike Sutcliffe. I want to go to Professor Edgar Peterson now, who's joining us virtually from UCT. Prof?
Very much for the opportunity to be part of this really important conversation. So I'm not entirely clear what the guideline is, how much...
Is Edgar unmuted?
Sound.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us? We can't hear you from this side, but...
My mic is on.
Where's the unmute button there? Yes.
I am unmuted.
Okay. Maybe let's pause with you, and we'll come back to you. And go to Prof. Phillip Harrison of Wits University. Are you there, Prof. Harrison?
Yeah, I'm here.
No?
Can you see my slide? Can you hear me and see my slide?
It's a sound,
Hello?
Yeah.
Well, at least we've established that you
Can
are
you
there
hear?
and you are part of the presentations. Whilst we sort out the technical issues. Right. Huh? Yeah, lest the Prof feel marginalized and say, everybody is being given a chance to talk. But I'm not. All right, Professor Meyer from University of Joburg, thanks very much, and you can go ahead once we sort out the technical issues there.
Is my sound working? Yes, I can
Yes.
hear now. I may have missed the email to do a presentation, but I'll say a few words. My background is that I'm a consultant, but I started to work at the university 10 years ago. I'm still a consultant. I see myself as a consultant doing academic work. So that means a pracademic. So a lot of people are scared if you talk as a professor or academic person, it's just theoretical and it's not practical. So I'm not like that. But I always refer back to theories. And we talk about that we haven't got equal development across the country or a region. Yes, that must be like that. That is how it works.
Yes.
That's what the theory also say. Can go back to the long time ago to the 1800s and 1943, the Rosenstein-Roden big push theory. You can look at Francois Perrault from France in the 40s. He said you get leading regions and lagging regions. And I've read many articles that say, let's try to have development equally spread over a region or a country. And that's not how it works, because that's not how the market forces work, and the history tells us that. So we need a spatial plan for South Africa. I think we had one in 2006, but it was never really implemented, the National Spatial Development Perspective. I also studied as a town planner and later became development economist, and so I mixed the two. spatial planning with economic development. And I feel we lack a spatial plan on a national level. All of the municipalities are doing spatial SDF, spatial development frameworks. But they are not based on a national overall principle that everybody can follow. And that's why we haven't changed the landscape yet from apartheid after 25 years to now. In 1994, I was in a meeting working for Boksburg municipality with the current Minister Gwedi Montage as the mayoral committee chairperson. There was a big housing meeting, and Vosloorus Extension 28 was in the planning phase, far away from everything, in the 30 kilometers away from Boksburg CBD.
Well, Minister Gungubele is here.
He was mayor.
He's from Mayor. So he probably was in that meeting as well.
Okay, maybe you were in the same meeting. There was a lot of important people there, and I stood up as a town planner at Boksburg municipality. I said, and this is just before the election, and it's a career limiting move from me, but I said, and the year before we had a CP municipality with Beyers de Klerk and people, the RVB were there, and I said in the meeting, yes, I don't think Extension 21 is such a good idea to have another extension further away from the CBD and job opportunities. Let's cancel this project. We build it right in the center of Boksburg. We save all of this infrastructure cost, the transport cost and everything. And those people said, you are crazy. You cannot think like that. How do you think like that? It's impossible to think like that. We are building there. It's a good locality, and it was shut down by the new government at that point of time. So I wasn't very popular. People will remember that meeting. So from a theoretical point of view, we need base planning, we need good spatial planning, otherwise we're not going to turn it around. I am from rural. Although I work at the University of Johannesburg, I stay in a rural town, and COVID made it much easier for us to stay in rural towns. I'm promoting rural because I stay 60 kilometers out of the city in a rural town, and it's a wonderful place. There's no traffic, there's no problems. So we can make rural in fashion again. Our rural towns and cities have been neglected a lot. You can go into the Mpumalanga, you can go into Northwest, anywhere you can go and have a look. They've been neglected. So the original National Spatial Development Perspective of 2006, and I've looked before this meeting, there's a draft new one from Department of Rural Development Land Reform. I don't know if it's been approved or whatever, but that previous one said, let's support and invest in the leading regions, meaning the metropolitan areas, the big cities, and for the rural areas, we try to maintain. And I like that basic principle, let's maintain, because there's not enough money to support everything. And that is not going to work. So we've got limited funds, huge needs. Well, that's the definition of economics. So we need to focus on the right areas, the nodes that can create multiplier effects, plus the corridors that's linking places, and that could be a wonderful solution. I think we're going to discuss the district development model more. I don't want to sound negative before we've analyzed it, but I'm worried about it. I think that is my initial starting point to discuss. Thank you.
And that is going to be the point where we start the next round of this. Why are you worried? That will be the question then. So I'm putting you on notice, Deputy Minister Nkarimeng and Deputy Minister Bapela, right? So start thinking about it. Professor Edgar Peterson at the University of Cape Town, we are back with you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I was saying thanks so much for the opportunity to be part of the panel. I will pick up directly on where the previous speaker left off, and in fact, I thought it was also important to go back to the National Spatial Development perspective, because it offered a very different approach to, I think, one aspect of this conversation. And in this morning's session, Dr. Ramaphosa indicated that one of the key priorities of the Infrastructure 2050 vision is to see how we achieve equal territorial access to economic and social opportunities. And of course, what the previous speakers just mentioned is that this is maybe not feasible, and that we will have to think much harder about prioritization. And the National Spatial Development perspective did in fact offer a lens for that kind of prioritization. So I think as part of the district development management discussion, and this idea of a unified planning system for all of the districts and metros connects very intimately with this idea of equal territorial access in the same way for everyone. So I think what we need to discuss, one of the issues is, can we distinguish between equal territorial access and equitable access? And what equitable access means is that, yes, all citizens have to have their constitutional rights met in a progressive way, as the Constitution insists, but we've got to recognize history, and we've got to recognize differential opportunity. So again, this morning we heard about the green hydrogen projects and how this will, specifically the Northern Cape, is particularly well suited for this very, very expensive investment, but an investment that will help to transition our energy mix into the future. Now, again, this helps us to see that for different parts of the country, there might be different kinds of infrastructural responses. And coming to the district development model, last year, in partnership with SALGA, I looked quite closely at all of the documentation and the government reports and the pilot projects in 3 sites and so forth. And I've recently just reviewed some of the progress reports that have been produced by the Department of the 2 respective deputy ministers. And I must confess, and I am very sorry, Dr. Meyer, whether whether you feel that I'm climbing on your little wagon here, but I must confess I'm equally worried. And the reason for this is at one level it's very simple. I think that it's creating a level of administrative interaction under the guise of coordination and alignment that is simply unsustainable and unviable. If we look at the history of integrated development plans within municipalities and within districts, we know that they perform very poorly. Municipalities struggle to get departments within a single municipality to coordinate effectively. And now we are expecting that a plan is going to facilitate coordination within departments in the municipality, across departments at the provincial government level, at the national level. We bring in the state-owned enterprises, we bring in some big private investors. Now, of course, in an ideal world, that would be brilliant. And I'm sure that there is a role for technology in helping to think about how do we see the investment landscape. But to think we can build a planning system in the way that it's currently designed in the district development management approach, in the pilots, that can transact all the necessary planning conversations in such a way, is the transaction cost simply too high. And my anxiety is that the outputs of that is going to be, we won't be justified. So shouldn't we, picking up on the theme of going back to basics, there's something about recognizing that we need to fix the core institutional element in the system, which is municipalities. And to fix municipalities, we need to understand that it is not simply a lack of capacity or a lack of funding. There's a deep political problem. The problem manifests through corruption, but there is now a baked-in system of patronage which we need to undo. Now we have to name that. We can't fix that issue with a DDM model because that doesn't speak to the core political challenges that sit there. So I think we just need to have this conversation about whether the district development model doesn't detract from what the real challenges are in terms of fundamental capability and political vision and so on. The second point I want to make moving on is sort of how do we think about rural versus urban and this equitable approach? What is the differential territorial imagination? Now, the starting point for that has got to be an acknowledgement that we have really, really struggled to get rural development right over the last 27 years. We are really struggling to have a compelling vision for how to take agriculture, which is only 2% of GDP, that's it, 2% of GDP, and it is meant to be part of the livelihood of that 30% of the population that Dr. Sutcliffe spoke about. How do we transform that sector? And of course, we know smallholder farming, particularly women entrepreneurs, is central to that. But we may want to expand that into a conversation in Africa around what is called agroecology, where we begin to understand the need to restore soils and the land. Think of it in terms of carbon capture as one dimension, but also think of a much smaller scale, less industrial type of agricultural agenda, which is more about food security, the experience of entrepreneurialism and livelihoods. In addition to that, on the diversification point, again building on Dr. Sutcliffe's point, we need to be much sharper about the way the energy transition can support rural economies. As we see now in the case of green hydrogen, but also with solar and with wind power, we need to think of water catchment areas as opportunities for highly labor-intensive, nature-based solutions to generate employment or the experience of employment. And of course, the lowest hanging fruit is an ecotourism strategy. And ecotourism is not tourism and ecotourism as subset. Let's just go for ecotourism as the national industrial strategy to build that proposition. And that, I think, is the one economic sector that has the greatest potential to connect rural and urban economies and to generate employment at a scale that we need to cut into that 32% of destitute people in rural areas. And then lastly, South Africa joined, was a founder member of the African Circular Economy Alliance, which has got 7 African governments. So what we've got to do is to localize that agenda of circular economy as a framework to think about how do we dramatically enhance the diversity and the resilience of various economic sectors. Now, my final point then is on this idea that we need to keep people in rural areas, or that we need to make the rural economies robust enough so that people don't migrate. Now, again, and as part of what has already been a set of provocative points that were made by earlier speakers, I just want us to think about this proposition. When someone moves to deep slit, yes, they don't have a job, they live in terrible circumstances, but they've got access to a whole range of urban services at a much lower price point than if that person stayed in rural areas. And more importantly, their children are more likely to access education and health opportunities that is absolutely vital for human development, which is essential for social mobility and social transition. So this is not an either or. What we've got to recognize is that households will make rational decisions. Our job in the policy space and in the government space is to enable people to optimize their opportunities wherever they may find themselves. So it's not about urban versus rural. It is about understanding that these territories are fundamentally interconnected through culture, through families, and through economic connections. And wherever people find themselves, they need to be able to access opportunities for both economic and social mobility. And that's the challenge. And at the moment, in how the district development management system is designed, and where the thinking is, I don't think it delivers that at the moment. To be fair, that the first phase is very much pilot, and government is understanding that there's got to be a learning process. And of course, having a panel like this is very much to confirm that approach. And I hope that these reflections, as brief as they are and as cryptic as they are, will help with that conversation so that we can deepen understanding what the institutional implications might be.
Sure,
Mr. Moderator, I'll leave it at that. I've got some construction in the background, so I'm sure you can hear some of the noise.
Well, we can tell that you
wasn't
are trying to...
intentional, but I hope I was audible. Thank you.
You were audible, and we could tell that you are bridging whatever divide that might be going on in your neighborhood. All right, Professor Phillip Harrison from Wits University, let's hear from you. And I suggested earlier that we may go for a comfort break, but you know, it feels like it's warming up, this conversation. So I'm not sure whether we will need to break, but you'll indicate to me. Let's hear from Professor Harrison first.
Thanks very much. Can I confirm that you can hear me and that you can see my slides?
Yes, we can hear you, we can see you, but not the slides yet.
Oh dear. Okay. So I want to use my presentation to address two matters, and if the slides become visible, if you could tell me.
I'm told that if you can use a screen share there, if you because we see you on
screen share. It is screen shared.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Why it's not coming up.
Yeah, we can see your presentation. Go ahead.
Can you see it now? Okay. So now, can you see it now?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Let me go ahead quickly then. So I want to address two issues, rural-urban interlinkages and the DDM. But the way that the conversation is going, I guess I should get you to worry to the DDM as quickly as possible. But maybe I'll just flash through some of the slides that are rural-urban interlinkages. Because the understanding of the rural-urban has been so profoundly interconnected is not a new one. We know about it, we've known about it for a really long time, but we're still struggling to bring this understanding through into policy and investment programs. We still tend to resort in our conversations back to the planning terms of rural and urban, even though we know the interconnections. I had the privilege of working on the NDP, especially Chapter 8, and it was important to me that it was a chapter on transforming human settlement and the national space economy, and specifically about the rural and urban, and that it began across cross-cutting perspectives to recognize how significant towns are, but it also recognized how interdependent that urban economy is on what we call the rural. And a sort of a more integrated perspective began to emerge. You can see that in the spatial representation in NP and the new spatial framework. This is continually evolving understanding. But if I had the opportunity to work again on Chapter 8, I would go further in emphasizing this interdependence and exploring what the urban might be and what the rural might mean. In today. And there's certainly been some real significant shifts globally in thinking about the rural and urban. So when I lecture students, I start with this very conventional representation of cities as dots, and then I go on to show them this, which is how the urban lab showing interconnections and relationships. And then I use the NASA urban nightlight images just to show how diffused it all is, how complex it is, how the urban and the rural really lead into each other. This obviously is India. But this is Johannesburg and Tshwane and moving towards the northeast. And you can also see, what is this? What are the patterns? What are we looking at? Do we even have a language for this? What is going on? And academics are now using the concept, the language of planetary urbanization, which means that urban lifestyles, commodities, economies, values are translated every corner of the globe. But there's still an understanding that without increasing awareness of dependence on nature, for example, that the rural zeitgeist is penetrating into the urban. So recently, 2 weeks ago, I took a trip down to Bushbuck Ridge, and this This is a very, very common representation in bushback regions. Certainly not everyone lives like this in buildings like this, but there's a lot of it. And the question is, what are we looking at? Is this urban? Well, it's neither, and it's both. And need to be able to, this represents people's lives, people living simultaneously the urban and the rural, responding to particular logics in their lives, and we need to find ways, in a sense, of being able to relate to this through government policy programming and infrastructure. And it's not just bushback ridge, it's everywhere. It's Kutuchaba, it's Kingsbata, it's corridor from Msane to Dimbaza. In the NDP, we unimaginatively called it densifying rural areas, but it's not. I think rightly emphasize that we need attention to management, institutional development, land reform, infrastructure vision, and so on in these areas, but didn't find the appropriate language to talk about them. In situ urbanization, displaced urbanization, maybe, but the rural is really still there. So it's one of the challenges. There's never either or in policy. I could be speaking this afternoon about, as the Deputy Minister did indeed, about critical importance of maintaining infrastructure in the urban core. And that is a biting concern. The flashing warning lights are there. But what I'm really emphasizing is one aspect of it. It's really finding ways to make people's lives work. And many people, maybe millions in this country, are living across places for reasons that have to do with their livelihoods and the logic of their lives. And I don't think that we really found a way of relating to it. So what instruments, mechanisms, sorry, this is just bushback ridge, that's zeroing in, asking the question of what is this? A recent book, but I don't have time. I want to get to the worry. And the worry is whether the DDM is going to assist us in resolving some of the really critical issues we've talked about, including this issue of how to assist with rural-urban integration. And I mean, this is a slide from a government presentation, and I can't dispute the slide. These are problems that we need to solve, that the DDM tries to address. We need coherent governance. IGR has been an Achilles heel in post-apartheid governance. And so there's no question that what the DDM is trying to solve are issues that we need to solve. But whether the DDM is correctly placed to solve them is something of a debate. And I'm going to turn it around a bit and say what I hope the DDM will become, rather than necessarily providing what academics we like to do, and that's a critique. And I think it is our role to provide the critique. I could certainly get into a debate around the scales at which different forms of alignment and coordination need to happen. They clearly need to happen from the neighborhood to the national, across all scales. Not everything can be coordinated at the district, but certainly if the district is not everything, it is something. There are some critical elements of coordination which can be coordinated at the district, and we need to be clearer as to what they really are. There has been a long succession of developmental initiatives in South Africa. Each succeeds the other. Each is launched with enthusiasm. Some are forgotten, replaced with something new, but never quite disappear. They layer on top of each other. So it is possible to become a bit cynical. But the DDM is with us, and so I'm trying to be productive in asking how can we embed the DDM in a way that is enduring and does actually address, in a real sense, these challenges that have been raised and understood within government. So in conclusion, this really is my wish list for the DDM, and that the DDM will provide an arena for meaningful, and I emphasize the term meaningful, real intergovernmental deliberation, building common understanding, building common vision, building frameworks for action, and that it won't be seen really as an imposition from one sphere over another sphere, because that would be the kiss of death for any initiative. We do need mechanisms and instruments for genuine IGR. And we need to ensure that instruments such as the DDM do indeed provide that. And if it does, it won't be accepted with circumspection and resisted, but it would be accepted with enthusiasm, I think, because in talking to municipalities across the country, the one aspect of the DDM which is really received with some hopefulness is the fact that through the DDM, municipalities can talk directly to national government in a way perhaps that metros have been able to do so through the city support program in National Treasury. So that's my first desire, if you like, for the DDM. And the second is that the DDM will build on the experiences, the lessons and contributions of what came before, rather than just being another bureaucratic layer. Over time, governance systems become increasingly complex because there is a tendency to add on and to produce new systems to resolve the contradictions of the past. And so my part critique is that it didn't build on the IDP, fix the flaws of the IDP, and make the IDP an all-of-government instrument. There may have been good reasons for not doing so, but my hope is that the DDM will fuse and will hybridize with systems that are already there, which have flaws that need to be fixed, but have already brought a lot of experience in terms of planning. Thirdly, that the one plan in the DDM will be an instrument of real strategy making, not just another checkbox. I know I'm running out of time, so I won't elaborate. I think you understand. I've talked about the fact that we need a much finer grained understanding of the scales needed for different forms of alignment and coordination, and that the DDM will not congeal into a new development dogma, a new straitjacket, but it will evolve into a learning-based, adaptive approach that embraces the lessons that we have learned over the last year, that turbulence, change is something we have to mainstream into all our systems and processes in governance. It's not just the one crisis of COVID. And then sixth, that we recognize the immense variation across the country, and that it will accommodate differentiation and context. And sitting in Gauteng, what does the idea of the city region mean for the DDM? Because the city region implies moving beyond district and metro boundaries. And then finally, and I think Edgar has spoken to that well, that it will deal with the more fundamental issues. Issues of coordination and alignment are critical, but there are also fundamental issues of municipal incapacity which have to be addressed. And it's not just about finding new mechanisms for alignment. But let me end there. I hope you heard me.
No, we heard you, and thanks again for your presentation. Let me...
Okay.
Thank you. Can we just continue without taking a break, you know? And then we finish at 4 o'clock sharp. So we've got about 40 minutes or so to have an engagement now. Starting with you, Professor Meyer, you introduced the question of being concerned about the introduction of the district development model. What exactly are your concerns regarding that? Yeah, go ahead.
Since I last said, I'm worried the other two colleagues at UCP and Wits explained nicely what it's about. I have been involved in, let's say, about 6 district municipalities. For example, the City Lake District in South Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal in the Northern Free State, Katsibandi in Mpumalanga, and I've never seen any capacity there. They are the least capacitated level of government at the moment, and that's my first point. I'm worried about the capacity and the skills that's available on the district level. And in the 1994 up to about 2004 or 5, we had the regional service councils, which were basically district municipalities doing regional planning in terms of spatial planning and master planning for services, infrastructure planning. They did a fantastic job, and they got levies, regional council services levies. They had money. The current district municipalities have got very limited funding, basically zero. And so I'm worried about the capacity and also the funding for this whole process in terms of levies. In Poland, when you talk about regional economic development, local government receives 70% of all taxes. That is incredible. And tomorrow we've got an LED webinar where LED guru from Poland will discuss this. And they've got big funding at local government level. Yeah, and that's why Poland is growing the fastest in the last 20 years of all developed countries.
That funding covers
everywhere. So they have got a fantastic model going there. More funding going into local government, but capacitated people, well-trained people on ground level. So funding is a problem. And then the structure, in these 5 district municipalities, I've never found that the locals are working with the district. There's this negative relationship between the local government and the district government. They don't cooperate. There's something going there, but they never cooperate. It could be about political views. Maybe one municipality is DA, other one is ANC. And I think with this coming local elections, that division is going to be bigger. So from a political structures point of view, it's going to be very difficult to do the coordination as my colleagues are talking there. And the main thing, if you read the DDM documents, its aim is to do cooperation between different levels of government, to have one plan, a spatial plan, economic plan, investment plan for the district. So I think I'm not the person that talked for long. That is the main issues that's worrying me. Solution-wise, we can discuss later on, but there was a big debate some time ago. Should we scrap the district municipalities as a level of government? And I still believe that is a major important issue to discuss because they're not funded. And maybe looking at provincial, if you take the Northwest province, I think 90% of municipalities are dysfunctional and under administration. So how will this process start? The province is taking over with administrators. They're running that whole province. Can't the provincial government be the coordinating body that can do it for everybody? In Gauteng, it will be like that. It's a city region. You cannot have the 5, the Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, Joburg, Sedibeng, and West-Rand districts running separately. There is already a structure that they should be working together, but also because of politics, they're not.
Well, thanks very much for that. Where should I go first? Maybe I should start with you, Dr. Meyer Sutcliffe, a brief response to your colleagues now that you are not part of government, that you know, and then I'll get the politicians to respond, because my sense is that the problems with the district development model lie with the politics, isn't it? Almost everything has got to do with what's going on politically, whether it be the dysfunctionality, the funding, you name it. No. It goes back to the politics of the day. But your thoughts on what your colleagues raised?
I think in fairness, the problem that we have as South Africans is that when our president says something, everyone then feels that that must be the mea culpa, that must be the Bible or the Quran for everything. And unfortunately, when you go back to what the president launched the idea of the district development model, it was very clear in saying, I want an all-of-government approach. There was an email I know because he sent it to one of his DDGs that basically said, as a president and I go to Kokstad to open up a correctional facility there, and suddenly there might be a housing challenge there or some other challenge. That's what confronts me with there, but someone's given me a speech about the correctional facility. I want to know what all of government is doing there. It's not a district municipal model. It's a all of government approach to start saying, And in fairness to particularly local governments where I come from, the problem with provincial and national governments is that they're able to switch their funds around. So today you're planning that a clinic is going to be in Polokwane in this and the next financial year, and then the MEC in that province might, I'm not saying it happened, might decide, no, the clinic's going somewhere else. So you as a municipality have planned that this is what's going to be happening and it shifts. And all the president started with was saying, let's get intergovernmental relations working so that we know what plans there are, what's being delivered, how it's being delivered, when it's being delivered, and make everyone accountable. The thing that frustrates me is that when you look at the last 20 years, and we heard this morning, the problem in our country is the private sector is not investing in infrastructure compared to other countries in the world at the same level of development. So let's put aside the private sector problem. Government, at the moment, municipalities, through all these tough times where everyone hates local government, the reality is they have delivered more infrastructure than provincial and national governments put together. If you take aside the SOCs, which obviously is primarily economic infrastructure, if you just look at the rest of their infrastructure. So the reality is municipalities are still delivering. Yes, we've got problems, but the problem is more with the way in which the Auditor General announces results than it is around issues. Because now we look at it and say, oh, whole country's in crisis. But if you take all the so-called clean audits in the country, they're actually those same district municipalities that don't have money. If you look at all the municipalities that don't have audits, or good audits, let's say they've got either qualifications or whatever, those tend to be very small municipalities for precisely the reasons we're saying there. There is underfunding, and you've now got to balance all of these needs with a community that has been dumped in a township, and not just dumped in a township, sometimes dumped in an area with no facilities. Now municipality must say, do I focus on this little town here, Virginia, or do I actually go and find out where the people are? Now, we don't tend to look at what's happened. 10 years ago, 40% of the municipalities had disclaimers. That's gone down to about 10 or 12% now.
Yes.
No one stands up and says, wow, that's actually happening. Yes, we must hold people accountable. That's not all corrupt. I mean, have any of you traveled to New York City and seen the state of some of their roads compared to Johannesburg? I can tell you, you'd far rather being in Johannesburg than New York City. So no one actually begins to look at where the problems are. Yes, we need accountability. I was talking to the deputy ministers earlier, and certainly after this elections, I would hope the majority party at least, start saying in their municipalities, they're going to make sure that the municipal manager, the head of technical services, and the CFO is a person where there is a public service approach to that we want people who are quality and we want them stabilized. Because it's about stability too. Almost all these municipalities where there are challenges, they have a municipal manager in today, gone tomorrow.
Yes.
CFO in today, gone tomorrow. That's a lot of the root cause there. So the DDM itself is saying we want all of government. And we are a differentiated country. So by doing it at that level allows us to know that sorting the problems in Gamagara is not the same as sorting the problems in King Cetshwayo, and not the same as the problems in eThekwini. eThekwini is not the same as Johannesburg. I mean,
by the way.
1/3 of the land area is traditional area. So enough for me. I think what we've got to do is appreciate what it is supposed to be, not what people think it should be.
Deputy Minister Nkarimeng, let me pick up on what Dr. Sutcliffe said, of course in the broader context of the issues that have been raised, but I'm citing an example here. Why do the residents of Hammanskraal, for instance, receive such poor quality water as compared to other parts of the city? And I'm wondering, I mean, if we talk...
I'll answer the question simply, Tim. Number one is that water treatment plants there and the sewage infrastructure. Remember, that sewage infrastructure was designed under apartheid with pipes that were not accommodating communities. That particular area takes you 15 years when you go through the environmental process to create the bulk water treatment or sanitation treatment things. You can't do that at a click of your fingers.
I understand. I'm asking the question.
There are plans there happening to get that.
Maybe I'm asking this in a public interest manner, that irrespective of the explanations given, the resident there would want to know why they're not receiving clean water.
So communication is a problem. We need
Not
more
only
Tim Modise
communication.
Also, and okay, go.
I have gone back 5 Hammanskraal IDPs from the city of Tshwane. The highest had 90 people in attendance in Hammanskraal.
Yeah.
So at a particular time, at the inception of the problem, the planning and the design, Meyer Ramokgopa had sessions to explain to the community of Hammanskraal to understand what were the issues. They were never there. And I don't blame them. I've been a mayor myself. I can show you the records of how badly understood IDP from communities themselves to government, to even ourselves as government leading that program. Because I'll ask myself, why would the IDP today for each and every municipality be manual when we should be digitizing everything, and you've got a view or a pothole, you can quickly deal with that issue where you are, or if you're driving in the car taking your kids to school, because there are competing issues. So I'm just not saying they're bad, they didn't attend. I'm just saying the system also anticipated a maturity from all the sides, and that this maturity will be achieved by everything almost balancing in a country. There's a high level of unemployment. You think more about what is going to be for supper today than attending an IDP of the mayor, and you go out and hustle and come back and the meeting is passed. That's just but one of the issues. Now, he indicated, my fellow panel members, that the municipalities struggle to get departments in an IDP, in a localized area. But that's not what DDM says. It comes right from a national level in terms of how does the equitable share gets to be divided, and to the last point, drilling where the municipality is. If you will recall, DDM was actually implemented up until 2007, 2008. Districts themselves were implementing agents and were dealing with infrastructure directly until a decision by National Treasury to decentralize to local municipalities happened. At the time, the assessment was that local municipalities had grown, they could be able to be authorities themselves and be able to run. In that 2007, 2008, we almost had audit outcomes which were 2-3 times better than the audit outcomes of what we're having today. In fact, if you want to laugh about it, you must ask Premier Zamani. So he was the district mayor in Northern Cape at that time. He explains it very well that in their 22 municipalities, if I'm not wrong, at the time, because we then moved from 378, crafting them down to around 257, not in the order of the census as I may call them now. They were able to have good, unqualified audit with proper accountability on issues. Now, you take that model, you do not change the financial model, you introduce an approach of centralization. In terms of planning, each and every department and a body that is supposed to institute or rather implement its own programs must continue under a coordinated plan. I can't sit as a mayor and not know, as Mike said, that the police station that was appearing in whatever plan of government is no longer happening in the city that I'm a mayor at, because I'm constant. In fact, it's just that some of these things you can't even report about them daily all the time. Now mayors, right up to the district level, they sit at the PCC planning forum of the president. So a mayor who comes from Northern Cape hears a premier presenting his plan of all the departments in a municipality or in a province where he or she comes from. And it makes planning and coordination proper. But I also want to harp on this issue of one size fits all, which is what is a problem. And give a very practical example, because sometimes we're driven by these audits and they make the discussion, because of the lack of accountability, to be like, no, they don't want to account. There's a small municipality in the Eastern Cape, very rural. it's on its 8th year of clean audit. 8. Yet their allocation for funds, it can never move and develop that municipality into be what it should be. It's called Sengu. And the mayor is female. I always celebrate that. You know, it's a cherry on top. Now, what is it that makes us to plan for Sengu the same way we are planning for another small that is in another area which is not as excellent in all the ticking of the boxes? They spend their meager 100%. They do their planning properly. They are able to even account. Those are 3 key steps. You need to assess them differently. And that is another element of strength that the approach is bringing. It says, saying, who are you? What do you have? Do we need to give you a new manager? Obviously, in this instance, the possibility is a no, because they are able to run their affairs not only once, 8 years in a row. So it means you may have to go to OR Tambo District Municipality, which is in the same province and capacity. Because districts are not in isolation from the challenges that municipalities are having in South Africa, but it will be relatively better and manageable to deal with 44 centers of excellence to make sure that they are able to account for the remainder of the municipalities outside the metros. Often people argue that urban municipalities are able to attract skills. No. In Limpopo, Polokwane, where I've been a mayor for 8 years, I was looking for director, technical services, and director transportation. Program facilitator, I advertised for 4 times in a row. The highest application number I had in one of those positions were 11. Right? Out of that 11, some just saw out of desperation and advert and say, let me try my luck. You can't even engage with them. So yes, there may be the skill abundance outside of government, but the current state of municipalities, because of political instability, financial unviability, makes municipalities not to be a chance or an option for professionals. You will say financial unviability is equals to audit and lack of non-accountability. No. In fact, the highest chunk, 99 or 90, 89.6 or so of our municipalities are unable to raise the rates and taxes. Now, the equitable share of what National Treasury gives to municipalities is only 9%, which means it's 10%. They must raise 90% for their own existence on their own.
But let me...
Now I go and take you and put you in Thulamela municipality.
Let me interrupt you there, Deputy Minister, if I may. Because a member of the public in South Africa would say, but you are the government. All the decisions that you've mentioned about equitable share and allocations and so on are happening there. Why are the people in charge of these things not changing their approach themselves? It can't happen elsewhere.
You see, that's what the DDM, I'm raising this example because exactly that's what the DDM deals with. When you take a small municipality and only focus on the 9% of what is being spent there, it's outside of the regional fund, out the 60% that you spoke about, which goes mostly to health and education. So government plans and plug a lot of money into a particular space, but don't do it collectively and together. That is why you run disintegrated system. For a municipality to know an indigent who's registered in SIDSSA, even if the SIDSSA office is in the municipal building, we do a different process. The SIDSSA, you go, you apply, you indicate. That system does not even tell me that person qualifies for a free basic service. So he still has to come again and register there. And that approach is what it wants to try to do, to centralize everything so that government can be able to say, from a service of education, health, policing, municipal, removal of a dustbin and everything, which makes a total being of a person who is a resident in a particular ward. This is how much it is. Because remember, there's no place in South Africa which does not fall in a particular ward or a wall-to-wall municipality or a wall-to-wall country. There's no place called national, by the way. So if Minister Pieterse is building a police station, he's building it at a particular ward in a particular center. It is the same if you want to look at it in terms of how do we drive our economic spending as government. Because you may find that that police station in that particular locality, who is supposed to account for its economic spin-off in that locality? Is it the SAPS or the National Department, or is it the Mayor, or is it joint of them? And for now, it's parallel. And the system says it must be a joint program.
Deputy Minister Obed Bapela, my question to you is twofold. One, the ordinary person who lives in whatever a district, how would they know that things are changing for the better? What kind of experience are those people going to have that tells them that it's much better than living under the old dysfunctional municipalities that they are experiencing currently, now that we've got a new way of doing things, right? Obviously, the impact must be felt by the people. They must be able to tell that this approach makes sense from their own experience. So that is one. Number two, what is the key, or what are the key compelling reasons that investors should look at, should consider rather, before making their investments in the DDMs? As was said earlier, that obviously investment has got to be made, opportunities exist, but for now people are holding back because of maybe current experience and other unknown factors. But what is it that's compelling this time around that should persuade them differently?
No. Thank you very much. Let me first take the points by Professor Ivan Turok of Wits, and then Professor Edgar Peterson in the UCT, who had really demonstrated also their understanding and the hope, obviously, by punctuating other elements that the district development model ought to take on board, but not dismissing also what Professor Meyer was saying, that the funding of local government is an issue here. The districts are not well funded, and an issue of funding of local government in South Africa is still a discussion. And the Fiscals and Financial Commission has also raised that particular issue quite sharply. SALGA itself has raised the issue. Currently, they get 9% of the Fiscals, from 7% to 9%. The ideally, they should be at around 18 to 19% spending of the national Fiscals. But we'll one day get there. And then the envisaged DDM, obviously, is to say, but there's other funding streams for certain activities that goes to a municipality space. Because when we build the schools, we don't build it somewhere in a province. There's nothing geographic space called a province or national. You still have to look for a space or somewhere in a municipality where there are a growing population and build a school, build a clinic, but it has been silo in most aspects. The school will be built, but there will be no water going into there for the toilets. There will be no electricity to the school. Or sometimes then the school will just be built and then nothing happens. There's no activity, there's no movement of people, because those other aspects that the municipality must also plan in their IDPs have not been informed. So we then want to then say, when a minister of basic education, health, or any other makes announcements about building X number of schools, and he prescribes where those schools are going to be in this district, and in that district, which is the host municipality of that school, we're able then to work together towards understanding the budget allocation for service, the bulk services, and services for those particular services. So we then have to really begin to, and therefore the DDM is then saying towards a one plan and then towards a one budget. And it's a process that will eventually get there, but collaboration, integration, and then working together is what we need to break, and then break the silos. And then some of the issues we are raising, Professor Meyer, will then be included, but then also the points that were raised by other professors, and then also by Mike Sutcliffe will also have to be But it's a working document that is not static. It's a document that is going to be scientific. It's a document that will build as we move. And as the president says, let's build this DDM model as we move and then take lessons, pause, and then begin to and develop it so that it's a very integrative model. Let me just give you 2 examples of 2 champions. One champion is Minister Mantashe in Bujanala. He then moves in as a champion. He engaged communities in each councillors of local municipalities and the districts, bring them into one room. Here I am, I'm now your champion from the national government. This is how we're going to be working collaboratively. And then also the champions selected by the Premier, 2 MECs that are also there. So it's 3 spheres of government in one room. They talk about the catalytic projects. What have been announced projects that have been budgeted, that are on the ground, that are not happening? Where are they? Are they in planning, design stage? Are they in procurement stage? Where are they? Oh, money went missing, and therefore there's nothing that is happening. So they are able to identify a group of those. Then there were shortfalls, and he then went and said, look here, let me go to the mining companies, because there's water spillage, not the water spillage, the sewer spillage into the Harte PS4 dam, and then already there's a court case pending in Mabatu court for the municipality of Madibeng to be interdicted from spilling that. And then they went to the treatment plant. It's old and it's leaking indeed. And they then said to the mining companies, can you then contribute and then find a solution, because you are the companies that are mining in this area within these municipalities, and you have people who are working for you. Can you contribute? They contributed over 200 million rand. That they will not give to the municipality, but they will work together with the minister and the municipality towards the bringing in their own engineers to help the municipality, that some of them do not have that capacity in Madibeng, to then go and refurbish that particular sewer plant so that it could no longer leak water and it must be fully functional, and then also attend to the water issues, because water disruptions to the mines also is an issue. So that is a model of government working with private sector, plus working with the people that are the beneficiaries of these particular services. So it is working, and I myself had to go to my own champion area in Ngagamudirimalema, where Mahikeng is. We are now beginning to say, there's been so many announcements from when Thabo Mbeki was the president. The airport of Mahikeng was announced, and then secondly, the industrial zone at the airport was announced. That was 2008. When you go there, it's just grass, service stands, nothing. So we are doing what then say we're going to unblock whatever is in the bureaucratic system to bring back the license to the airport, and then begin to ensure that industrial loan, and working with the mayors. And the water quality in the area is a challenge. The local municipalities contributed 10 million each from their own budgets to then contribute towards a water laboratory that is going to be built in Mahikeng, so that all water that comes from water sports Sidibeng can then be tested before it could go to the home. Because currently, you open a tap, the water is brown. So they are going to build a water laboratory, because they're taking an example from Thabo Mufuzane in the Free State, where Kwakwa is and Maludapofung is. They have also built a similar structure. Now all those municipalities, before the water goes to the home state, there's a water laboratory. There is complete, and then now we're going to start it. We have unblocking all those things. So the champions that the president has appointed as ministers and deputy ministers go in there to say, I'm here sent by the president to come and work with you in a collaborative, a cooperative way, and then we hope therefore that's how we're going. And the last question about the people and the benefits. We do go to the people. I had a stakeholder meetings, first with the business communities. We met with them all to say what is the district development model, workshop them, and they all appreciated after engaging on what is this all about. Went to the civil society organizations, we did the same. Went to the traditional leaders, we did the same, because majority of land in that area, 70% of it is owned by traditional leaders. And there's an urban edge that is emerging around Mahikeng, which is the capital of the Northwest, and in some land, people are just building on it without any approvals. We then say municipality, we need to cooperate with the traditional leaders for the land release so that they can know the plans of the municipality in advance, municipality by municipality in all, and then so that we can then begin to get land for development. And that land obviously is communal land. It means it meant to be given in for human settlement, for schools, for clinics, for other things, so that then we can then begin to see a flourishing, and for them to understand the urban edge and the urban agenda, and then this particular migration. So it does work,
Sure.
and therefore the people are now appreciative to say thank you very much, and then we have to have this quarterly, so that you move with the people, is what we call people's participatory development, as we call it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And just to remind everybody in the room here that we have to be in the plenary by 4 o'clock, which is a few minutes from now. But I'm giving the opportunity now to Minister in the Presidency, Mondle Gungubele, to make a couple of remarks. He's been following the proceedings.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think one has been educated by a lot of submissions, especially having not been in local government now since 2016.
Well,
I think.
Sorry, because we want to see you. You see,
What should I do?
you must face this direction.
Oh,
Face
Yeah.
the audience
should I sit here?
on stage.
Yes, maybe that's better.
Okay.
On the right wing.
I've never been a panelist in my life. It's an opportunity. I think I've listened, and I got educated in a number of ways. To me, my experience, Tim, is that all systems, I'm just being crude now, all systems were adopted because they've got a capability to deliver something. All systems. The problem I have is when a system has not been optimized, moving from one system to the other doesn't change anything. If a system has not been optimized, every system has got its weaknesses. You raised a question, which I don't think we go to. You said everything is at a political problem. And I'm sure maybe we don't like to hear that. Professor Edgar says, I don't have a problem with DDM. How is it going to deal with lack of skills, lack of leadership, lack of whatever? How is it going to deal with those issues? And we're not dealing with that question. The point I want to make, Tim, is that I would be comfortable in this discussion if we're saying the system we're moving from, it has been honestly and optimally applied. Now, it has been exhausted. We need another system which will be optimally applied and give better results than this one. We are taking the problems of this system that we are opting out to the new protocol, to the new system. What are these problems? Subjective problems of the people who are deployed in municipalities. My own experience is that if I use teaching quickly, I had a short spell in teaching, is that rural communities have been able to produce scientists without laboratories, without infrastructure, without anything. Actually, at some stage, even beat the urban, what we call, the urban schools. What has been a secret there? Leadership, consistency, set of principles and standards which are implemented. In other words, those schools benefited from healthy subjective aspects of the entire subjective elements, leadership, in other words, warm bodies. The challenge we have, unless we have healthy subjective aspect together with the objective aspect, we will not optimize any system. You go to Joburg, Amos Masondo and his team, other culprits are here. If Deputy Minister Bapela remember, there was an opposition, something had money, Soweto had no money. It meant when you created a single government, it meant resources from Sandton will be used in Joburg.
Yes.
The outcry did not sustain, you know why? Because the Sandton people saw the results of this money in Soweto. I'm not sure if I make that point. They saw the results of that money in Soweto. Tarring streets, trade, and businesses emerging, and so on. At some stage, they were selfish, of course, some from racial benefits and so on. But over time, they saw where this money was going. Because both in Joburg, the system and both the objective and subjective elements were healthy. I don't want to speak some of us where we worked. So, now, DDM, I think Deputy Minister Nkadimiang explained this. DDM seeks to say, let's work together so that we are coincident in terms of understanding who has got resources, who's got no resources, and whatever, and so on. We hope it will deliver, but my argument that if you have not changed the subjective protocol elements, one other issue without belaboring this point, it's not just the correct systems and the good people, by the way. It's also the implementations of those systems consistently. We have spoken about monitoring and evaluation. These are not rock science issues. Even if people are not skilled, by the way, if a system is applied consistently, they will not pass the test of prevalence in that system. In other words, there's a missing consistency somewhere of implementing standards as agreed. And mainly, I want to agree with you, Tim. They are from the political side. Because those are the ultimate authorities of what we call, of municipalities. Those are the ultimate final sayers in municipalities. I have seen this when there are strong political personalities and strong political collectives trying to do the best with the little at their disposal. Difference has been made. Danie, Prof can go back to Boksburg. Those politicians, I know exactly how they changed the face of Boksburg. It's because the collective that was deployed there, Mantash, Khaya, and so on, I can list all of them. He knows. They were consistent, and they were credible, and they were honest, and they never used their authority to misuse the resources. So all I'm saying is that DDM will add value, there's no debate about it. But it's not going to liberate us from the crisis we are in now unless we sort out the subjective elements, that of ensuring that we are consistent in the systems that we apply. So that's the story that I thought maybe the panelists will educate me about, because my experience is that we are not dealing with what we're supposed to be dealing with. That's exactly what you have said. There are two things in my closure is that you are asking, you said it's always lies with political problem. You say two, whatever system you are going to implement, how is it going to change the lives of the people? What is key is the difference it makes in their lives. So I want the panelists, to me, to speak to the subjective elements, consistency of the execution of systems that we agree upon, and to what extent is that a problem that is going to be chronic even under DDM?
Well, thanks very much, Minister Gungubele in the presidency. Unfortunately, at this time, we have to break and go to the plenary, so we're not going to have a response to what you say, but you are well placed within the presidency to ask that question. And then I can make contact with you in a month or two and say, how did you go? Did you get satisfactory answers to your questions? And let me thank Professor Harrison and Professor Pieterse, who joined us virtually, for your inputs. And you raised good, pertinent points that will continue to be part of this discussion. But the objective remains bridging the divide between urban and rural through the new DDM approach as we spoke. But the challenges remain, as we've all heard, and the efforts are being made to improve where improvements have to be made. But one key thing I must tell those who are in charge of South Africa: ordinary South Africans expect results beyond the discussions that we are having. Frankly, you can call anything by any other name, as long as it does not make any difference or it makes it worse for them, whatever is being introduced will not succeed or will be discredited. With those remarks, I wish you good luck. At least you know the story, you know what the issues are, and you are applying your minds to those, and we expect that there will be better outcomes going forward. And thanks again to the panelists and to those who attended this session. I appreciate it. Let's go to the plenary. Thank you.